In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the 1984 James Cameron directed science fiction horror classic, The Terminator.
That was such a long intro before the name. But to be fair, all of those things are really interesting about the film. So, the original Terminator.
Yeah, sometimes I start talking and saying stuff and I don't even know what the next word that's going to come out of my mouth is.
I can't believe we've never done this film before. I mean, I guess I is it a horror film?
Is it a horror film? Now, I want to say yes.
Yeah,
I want to say it's cut from the horror movie cloth
yeah, the
of
sci-fi
that.
horror genre. Yeah,
Yeah, because it's got a lot of the traits of like slasher movies from that
yeah.
kind of era where like say let's I don't know what was a popular horror movie from there like Friday the 13th and Halloween where
Well,
there's
it's very much like Alien with the body horror aspects of it and the fact that it's
yeah
super sci-fi. And you definitely say Alien's a horror film.
Alien is a horror movie, the first one, yeah. But
Yeah.
it's like you got a pretty young girl who's being pursued by a killer. So it's kind of
So true. Yeah, it's a
yeah.
slasher film. I see where you're going with. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
He's the
yeah.
serial killer.
Yeah, and she's the Sarah Connor is the final girl or the
The first and
yeah.
final girl.
Well, yeah. Yeah, because there's a string of women that get killed before her. So
Yeah,
just
other
like
Sarah Connors.
yeah, just like Halloween, how there's like loads of girl
Yeah.
babysitters that get killed, right?
Yeah, and there's that bit when the detective is figuring out that they're all called Sarah Connor, and it could then turn into a true crime like film, you know? If it wasn't,
Yeah.
if it didn't have the sci-fi bit, it would have actually been a really cool film about everybody with the same name dying and mass hysteria with everybody who had that same
Yeah,
name.
the phone book killer.
Yeah. I'm
So
sure there's a film like that out there. There must be.
oh no, yeah, yeah. So I've seen this movie before a billion times, and I mean I grew up. I was watching this movie like when I was like 6 or 7 years old. Like, that's how
Yeah.
far back. I remember like when this was on video cassette, and I
Mm.
remember seeing like when a newspaper would come through the letterbox, there'd be like leaflets inside the newspaper, and there used to be this kind of oh gosh, I'm sure people that are listening to this are gonna like murder me for getting this wrong, but there used to be this kind of mail-in record company where you could mail in to get CDs or records or VHS tapes, and I think it was called Britannia or Britannica. Britannia, I think it
Ooh.
was called Britannia, and I just remember seeing the Terminator VHS on it, not having having no idea what it was, but I just remember the iconic image of Arnold
Yeah.
Schwarzenegger with the glasses,
Yeah.
and as a kid, just drooling over that image, thinking, I want to watch this, you
Ah,
know.
so cool.
Yeah, so like, what was your first experience with this movie, and what did you think of it?
So, like you, I have grown up with this film, particularly because my dad was a bodybuilder. He was in love with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so when I was really young, he wanted to show me, like, oh, how cool is it that he was in this film? And he loved, we used to have, and it reminded me watching it again, we used to have these, like, we used to jokingly call them like manly, manly men film nights where we would just watch like Rocky, Rocky or Terminator or just films that were a Godfather, all the films that you think, yes, men like film.
Yeah, yeah.
And this
Like
was one of them.
meatball movies, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And there is a certain like special aspect of these films where it is just a load of testosterone thrown into a film with lots of men being men and sweaty and big and muscular. It's just like it's so quintessentially manly that I kind of love it. So I have seen this film a lot, and I did again study at university. This was
Right,
part
right.
of the same course that I did Alien in. Who knows what the theme was? I think it was like monsters in film, and he was
Yeah,
one of the monsters that we did.
yeah.
And it was actually it was really interesting because it was all about the ideal male figure, and that because
Mm-hmm.
he is like chiseled out of stone,
He's
just
like Mr.
insane.
Universe or something or
Yeah.
another.
And so it was the best person to choose, I think, for this to have somebody that was like almost not real in real life. Like if you saw him in real life, you'd think, is that real? Is that a real person? Because he's just insanely jacked. And he's just really cool. So it was perfect. But yeah, I've always been very fond of this film. I had actually forgotten quite a lot of it when I watched it back. Like I obviously
Me
remembered,
too. Mm.
yeah, I remembered some of the staples. I've always remembered the scene where he goes into the police station and he wants to speak to Sarah Connor, and then
Yeah,
they're like, you can't speak to her, and then he goes out and drives the car into the into the police station. But I'd
yeah,
forgotten all of the other police station scenes, for example. Like I
gotcha.
forgot that they were there for so long. And so you watch it back, you're like, oh yeah, there is more to this film than I think of when I think of the Terminator. So I'm glad we watched it again.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. Like after watching it in preparation for this episode, I'd realized how long it had been since I last watched it.
Yeah,
And because as a kid, I watched this so many times, and yeah, watching it as an adult again after a long time, there's so many little bits that I picked up on, and there were entire scenes I'd forgotten all about, and I was thinking, is this some kind of like extended edition with extra
yeah,
scenes that I don't remember or something? But I don't know about you, but so I had this film on VHS growing up, but it wasn't like a professional VHS; it was just recorded from TV.
yeah,
And I'm so used to watching that VHS tape that watching this again on I think I streamed it on Amazon Prime or something. I don't know where I
yeah,
streamed it on. And the quality of the image on streaming is so crystal clear and so good, and the sound is so like there's so much clarity in the sound and
yeah.
everything that it feels there's something about it that I didn't like because
It's too clean.
it's too clean and too perfect. I mean, that's not a bad problem to have, but I'm just so used to the crappy VHS tape,
Yeah,
and yeah, that is it didn't feel real. It just felt like it honestly felt like I was watching some kind of different movie, like some kind of long lost remaster with all the extra scenes, or maybe the TV version that I watched back in the day maybe had scenes cut out, maybe because that's kind of a
yeah.
common practice from back in the day. They would always cut out clips and to make it a bit more suitable for TV and whatnot.
True. Well, yeah,
So
bring back the pixelated, pirated VHSs rather than all this new technology that we have
yeah,
with Prime and everything. Yeah, I mean, I feel like like I said, the scenes that I'd forgotten, I was like, there's so much more substance, I think, to this film. I mean, it's not, I don't think it was ever made to be a particularly thought-provoking. Well, there are parts of it where you're like, oh, that's really cool. But
Mm.
I think it was made to be an action film where, like, the premise is that this woman's getting stalked by a cyborg from the future. I mean, it's never going to be the most top end kind of sophisticated movie ever, and that's okay. But there are surprisingly lots of parts where it makes you think about the future, and especially, I know you probably wrote this down as well, but the fact that the future was 2029.
Yes, a few years from now. That's right. Yeah,
Literally a few years
yeah.
from now, I was like, well, that's depressing. We don't have very long until our civilization just goes to hell and we're taken over by the robots.
Well, the timing is quite apt because like AI has really
Yeah,
taken off in the last few years, and
it's going to
I
take
wouldn't.
over.
I'm just waiting for the day I'd go online and I see something like, I don't know, whichever military force, the Navy or whatever, decides to implement AI into their missile guidance systems or
And
something
then
like
they all
that.
go off at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do find those future scenes quite funny because, again, you have to just think about it that it was done at the time, but they
Mm.
are almost like puppetry, some parts of it, because their CGI is like a little bit old, it hasn't caught up as much. It's a bit,
Well, it's not even CGI. It's even more primitive than that. But it's funny because when I was watching the opening, the Future War sequence, I just thought it was fantastic. I was so in love with it, and I love how because I think a lot of the kind of monsters machines they use in the opening sequence, like those giant tanks and whatnot, and the flying machines. I think they're all miniatures, and they
yeah,
kind
it
of
looks like they are.
yeah, yeah, and I thought it still holds up, but the whole oh gosh, with this movie, I just think it's shot so damn well. Considering, so like just a bit of background, like this Terminator was a low budget movie. This was like a B movie, low budget movie,
Yeah,
and in back in '84, it wasn't the first Terminator movie is like a cult classic. Like it
yeah,
wasn't even it wasn't a massively big box office smash back in the 80s. It wasn't like it went up against movies like Beverly Hills Cop and I think one of the Indiana Jones movies. I forget which one. That might have been Temple of Doom, and yeah, and the first Ghostbusters movie. Sorry, I don't know if I mentioned that. So those were like big movies that made
Yeah.
like 200, $300 million. Whereas I think the first Terminator movie made less than 100 million. I think maybe even less than 90. It didn't, yeah. But for its low budget and how it was made, like I think it's done incredibly well. I think the visual style, like the kind of dramatic way the movie is lit as well, like it's like a film noir almost. And it's like like a science fiction. If film noir was a science fiction
Yeah.
crossover, like this kind of what it looks like. And I just think it just, oh man, I was watching like what rewatching the bits when Terminator and Carl Reese kind of come back in time,
Mm,
and just how the way the streets of Los Angeles are lit up and
yeah.
captured. Like there's I just thought it looked wonderful. It looks beautiful. It's just holds up. And
It reminded me
yeah,
quite a lot of Gotham City. It was very like, the worst parts of the city. So you had like a lot of the scene where what's his name? The dude,
what, Carl Reese?
Carl Reese, yeah. When he
Yeah.
gets dropped in and he's like, in an alley and there's like newspapers
Yes.
flying
Yeah.
everywhere and you always think that there's going to be somebody around the corner. And I think a lot of it is shot at that night or
Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah.
same night. And it's like slightly raining and it's just very, like you say, film noir. It gives a very good atmosphere. And I also love the music in it. It was so 80s. Like, just that
What
kind
the
of
sound, the backing score or the music?
like the backing score. So like
Sure. Sure.
just the atmosphere that it built, that it was
Yeah.
like, oh, something's coming, something's gonna happen. And you're
Yeah.
constantly like, what's coming next? And I think what was really good is that it just went straight into it. The Terminator lands in his Olympus pose on the floor
Yeah.
and he's just instantly starts ripping people up. And it's just honestly, it obviously he makes this film. I know that he's not a great actor. I know that like that's not the reason why he's so good in this. It's just because it's who he is and the kind of the lore around him as being Mr. Olympia, being the most amazing bodybuilder at the time. And even now he's still considered like one of the greats. Having someone like that was a stroke of genius. And I did read, and I'm sure you saw the same thing, that OJ Simpson was considered to be Terminator, but the producers feared that he'd be too nice and that nobody would believe that he would be a killer.
Yeah, I mean that's gone around for decades, but I think that's like a myth
Yeah,
or a
but the idea of it is that like they wanted someone that they thought could be a killer. So they thought OJ Simpson couldn't be a
yeah,
killer, and
yeah.
so they weren't going to cast him. Whereas I think Arnold Schwarzenegger's like the way that he is, it was so robotic, and it's probably because I mean it's a bit harsh, but because he's probably not a great actor because he hadn't really done much acting apart from like one other thing. He is very robotic, and so it works being a robot with
Yeah.
no feelings.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that, because I think oh gosh, I could be misremembering this, but I think the original intention of the Terminator character. So in the movie, Carl Reese references that Cyberdyne Systems Model 101 infiltration unit or whatever. And I think that kind of hints to the Terminators are meant to be in like master infiltrators, where they could be
They
anyone in
look,
society.
yeah,
Whereas Arnie sticks out like a sore
yeah.
thumb. Like he's like 10 foot tall compared to everyone else and like 8 foot wide. And I think oh gosh, I think so one of so there's the two detectives that are chasing after Sarah or whatever.
Yeah,
Sorry, the white guy, Lance Henriksen.
yeah.
I think the intention was originally to have him as
Oh,
the
really?
Terminator.
Oh, because he
Yeah.
would blend in.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the producers wanted Arnie to be Kyle Reese.
Right.
And but Cameron didn't want when they met, Cameron didn't want Arnie because Arnie's just too big, and I
Yeah.
think Arnie was veering more towards the Terminator character when he was reading the script or something. He was more
Yeah.
interested in the Terminator character. So I think things just worked out the way they worked out, and they all got on well and everything. And Arnie
But
got
I think that
well.
works so much better because you want to feel intimidated by this character and almost feel like it's so hard to kill him, and it's so hard to
Yeah.
get away from him because, you know, he is so ruthless and is just imposing by himself, regardless of the
He's a
fact that
screen
he is
presence for
also,
sure.
yeah, massive screen presence, like literally a massive screen
Yeah.
presence. So what did you think of like watching it back? Was there anything that stood out to you this time round that you were like, oh, you know, I either didn't remember that or that was a really cool bit?
Oh gosh, there's lots. I think I've got so much, so many notes I was taking on this film. So you know, random bit of trivia. So Lance Henriksen, the guy who plays the white detective, I forget his
Yeah,
name. Was it Traxler or something? Oh, that might have been the other guy. I forget. Him, and Bill Paxton. So Bill Paxton was one of the punks at the beginning. You know, when they're like,
right.
"Nice night for a walk," and he's like,
Yeah, takes his clothes.
yeah, so Bill Paxton and Lance Henriksen, I think, are three actors that have all been in I think they might have all been killed by as well. They've all been in a Terminator movie, an Alien movie, and a Predator movie.
No
And
way.
I think I might be misremembering, but I think all three of them have been killed by their
The
respective.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think Lance Henriksen gets killed by the Alien Queen, maybe. I don't remember, but yeah. Anyway, they're in all. So Alien, Terminator, and Predator are like the big three sci-fi
Yeah.
monsters from like the 80s slash late 70s. So I think that's quite a unique privilege for
Yeah,
those.
it's like you're
Those
just a
guys.
perpetual victim in these like cult classics.
Yeah, we need to get them in more. Well, sadly, we can't with Bill Paxton as he passed away a couple of years ago. But with Lance Henriksen, we need to get him in more science fiction movies, get him killed
Just
by
to kill
more,
him off again.
get killed up by more, yeah, other guys and whatnot. I liked how, I mean, these are just little touches, but I liked how when Arnie lands, you know, in LA, how he's totally unfazed by the time travel process. He just stands up, walks with purpose to the edge of
Yeah.
I think it's the Griffith Observatory, looks over LA. You know, he's just very purposeful with his movement, goes to the punks, kills them, gets their clothes. And by contrast, you got Carl Reese, who really suffered through the time travel process.
Yeah.
He's there trying to catch his breath and he's in
Yeah.
pain. And in contrast, he when he takes his clothes off the homeless person, he doesn't kill the homeless person. He just kind of
No.
steals his pants or whatever. But
Yeah.
that kind of I just love how that kind of contrast exists. It's just something very subtle, but it kind of sets the stage for and even as a viewer, like if you're watching this movie for the first time, sorry, like, you know, and you have no idea what this film's about, and you don't know who Arnold Schwarzenegger or anyone is, you might not even realize which one of these is the bad guy and
Yeah.
which one
Or
of these is the hero. Yeah,
exactly. And you'd know that something was up. Like, you know,
yeah,
you know that something's wrong with the difference between the two of them,
yeah,
but you might not necessarily exactly know which one is which, or whether they're both on one side, like they could both be bad, but just bad in different ways. But
yeah.
you know from the beginning that there's something wrong with the Terminator because, like you say, and he's also massive. He's not a normal person,
No.
so it's like, okay, there's something.
No, no, and prior to this movie, Schwarzenegger had made the first two Conan, the only two Conan the
But
Barbarian
yeah,
movies that he's in at least, and he was the hero in both of those.
yeah.
So
So
he's a traditional hero. So you know, he could like misdirect the audience, and
yeah, I feel like he's always tried to not be typecast in what he does because he did this and then obviously later on did Twins. Is it Twins?
yeah, he did that in a couple of years after. Well, yeah,
Yeah. So
more, yeah,
he clearly wanted not to be typecast as the hero, the villain, the funny guy. He wanted to do a bit of everything in his, you know, relatively short movie career. But I think from watching the documentary about him, have you seen it? The Arnold
oh,
Schwarzenegger documentary?
I think so. Yeah, yeah, I believe
What I
so.
took away from that is that everything that he did, he wanted to do it to the best of his ability. So if he was
Yeah,
going to go into movies, he was going to work really, really hard to
yeah,
do it right. If he was going to go into politics, he was going to work really hard and actually become the governor. You know, like all of the things he did, he put 100% into. And I think he definitely put 100% into this role, as well as the other characters. Like I think that they all worked really well together. I think it's hard sometimes when you're watching a film for the 10th time to
mm,
appreciate what it would have been like to watch it for the first time and feel the terror that Sarah Connor starts to feel as she realizes what's going on. And I think the scene that I loved was when she goes into the club because she knows she's being followed and there's a lot of misdirection, who she's supposed to trust, you know. and then suddenly like she's just sitting there and the sea of people opens up and then the Terminator is just walking towards her. And that is when you think this is definitely a horror film, because that really freaks you out and you just want to shout, run, like get out of there, which he eventually does. But it's really good at building up this feeling of unease to a point where it peaks and you're like, oh no, this is really bad. Like this person is definitely out to get you. But we have no idea why. If this is the first time we're watching it, we don't know why. And so it's interesting to watch because you think, why would they, like, A, where have they come from? Didn't know they'd go back in time at this point. You know, why Sarah Connor? What's possibly could she have? She's a single woman that doesn't have a boyfriend and is, you know, is working in a cafe. Like
Yeah.
all these things work together to make it really interesting.
Yeah, that scene with the nightclub is probably my favorite scene in the film.
Yeah, and the way he walks through, like they're like, you need to pay. He just walks through.
Because at that point in the film, Sarah has discovered through the news that there are other Sarah Connors that are being killed off.
Yeah,
And then by this point, Kyle Reese, it's funny because like with the Terminator, he's just working his way through the phone book and killing every single Sarah Connor that exists.
yeah,
Whereas
very
Kyle Reese doesn't,
strategic.
whereas Kyle Reese doesn't do that. He already knows who she is because how it's revealed later on in the film, Kyle Reese had always had a photo of Sarah Connor his whole life, so he knew exactly what she looked like.
Yeah,
And then, but he didn't know who the Terminator was. So
yeah,
he literally had to wait for the Terminator to make a move on Sarah before he could kind of take it or attempt to take it out.
the tip take it out. Yeah,
And that just the way that scene works, like how you got the music in the club, is it and how it kind of like merges into it starts to go into slow motion, how it merges into the Terminator scary music,
yeah,
and just how everything goes in slow motion. And Sarah's so concerned with Carl Reese who's following her that her
yeah,
focus is on him. She doesn't even see bloody Terminator
yeah.
coming up from the side of her until his red laser is on her head. And
And the
that's when
fact that like because he's a machine, he has no concept of other people, so he just starts shooting in this club. And that's another scene where you're like, that this is either the most cold-blooded killer or something is wrong with him because he just open fires in the club. And again, it's the contrast between the two men because you know the Terminator does not care about anybody else. He just has a target that he needs to reach.
he's just programmed. And then the thing is, once he, if once he's completed his mission, he's no longer required. He would essentially just, I don't know, go into hibernation or shut himself down or whatever. But I thought the name of the club was quite interesting. So the club was called Tech Noir.
Yeah,
And and I think the James Cameron refers to the genre of this movie as tech noir, so like film
ah,
noir, but a science fiction tech noir movie. So like similar to stuff like Blade Runner and whatnot.
it's a really cool name for a club.
Yeah. But one of the other meanings I took away from from tech noir is like tech noir, like dark technology or whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
And like the Terminator and Skynet and whatnot are like dark technology in this universe where it's like tech gone bad or whatever.
yeah.
And I wasn't sure if it was like a double meaning or something, but
I
yeah,
mean,
it was
it
interesting.
probably was because there's so many points in the film where once we understand what the future is going to be like, we're reminded of where the world is heading because we have flash forwards and we see what
Yeah.
life is like, and then we see the toll that it takes on Kyle as a person who's lived there. You know, he's got scars all over his body. He's like haunted. And then you go back to the present day and it's very different. Although it's not, what I like about this film is it doesn't just make like modern times good, future times bad. It's like the modern
No.
times aren't necessarily better, like that is better, but it's not necessarily good because, like you say, it's very dark and mysterious and like it has a little bit of that grungy city element to it, but it's obviously better than the future where it's just bones and disease and very gross.
Yeah. Touching upon that, one scene I wish the film had is, and I don't know where you would have inserted it, but maybe when Carl is still looking for Sarah and he's in daylight in LA, just a scene where he kind of absorbs everything around him, and
Yeah,
because just maybe it catches a moment where he can't believe where he is because he comes from like this ravaged
yeah.
post-nuclear war, post-apocalyptic future, and now he's in a place where there's trees and blue skies.
Yeah,
So
that's a really good point, and it would have have been nice for him to be sad because of that. You can see in his face that he's really sad that he doesn't have any of this. And like when you watch it for the second time, you're like, oh, that's why he looked like that. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, yeah. So with the music, the Terminator theme, I think, is meant to be, with the,
Yeah.
I think that's meant to be like the Terminator's heartbeat
Ah,
and the pulsing of it, well, his pulse or heartbeat or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
I think that's where it comes from, like a machine's heartbeat, because it's all very synthesized and mechanical. Like
It
it sounds like,
is.
yeah, because it sounds like bits of metal bashing against each other or something.
Yeah. And
But
I do like,
that's
I
very
mean,
cool.
at the beginning of the film, it's quite hard to visualize the Terminator not being a person because it is obviously a human who's playing him. And so, Carl obviously explains that as they've got better, Terminators now look like everybody else. They've got a blood and flesh and everything muscle on top of their
Mm,
skeleton. And as the film goes on and the Terminator gets hurt more, well, not
mm,
hurt, but broken up more and more and more, it starts to reveal itself as more of a robot,
yeah.
and it makes it more scary as you go through because you then can realize how cold this killer is because you can actually see that it is not a human. And I like that progression. I like that it kind of slowly he morphs himself into this literal skeleton of just metal. But I don't want to be too mean, but there were a few scenes that made me laugh out loud when like
Oh yeah.
the prosthetics where he takes his eye out, that
Yeah.
scene,
Oh,
it's
with the
so
with the
bad. Like
with
I
the
do
head,
get,
Jim.
yeah, it goes from here's a shot of Arnie's face and then here is a very very unrealistic plasticine head or whatever.
Pape mache or
Papier
something.
mache head with the most ridiculous hair on top of it. And I understand what they're doing. It's hard to do that, but I do. That was the only scene where I was like, I think they could have been a bit more clever in the way that they did that. Because thinking about Alien, that's older than this,
Yeah.
like there are scenes in that are so realistic, like we said in the Alien episode when what's his name gets his head chopped off, and they do it so that he's obviously his real head is coming through the floor. Like they've made it look like he doesn't have a head. I feel like they could have had some movie magic to get that eye out in
I
a in a better way.
I mean, I can't verify this because I haven't checked, but Alien was like a big studio film. Like,
Oh, of course, yeah.
it
I
was
guess the
shot in,
budget, yeah, I guess the budget
yeah.
does make a difference.
Whereas with Terminator, when they shot the scenes on the street, it was
Yeah.
literally just a camera crew running on the street in the middle of the night. Action, go. Okay, let's run. Next location. It was that kind of they
Wow.
didn't have permits to shoot, from what I don't know if that was just applied to the reshoots or whatever, but it was that kind of like rough and ready kind of
Yeah.
filmmaking from what I've read at least. And actually, give me one sec. Well, let's see what the budget for Alien was, because it might give a better understanding of
But even with a low budget, I think you can do some camera work to make it look more realistic.
it's
The
Alien.
fact that it was like normal head, prosthetic head,
Mm.
normal head, prosthetic head, and it was very obvious which was which.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah, of
even if they
course,
did
yeah.
it from the back or like they shot the back of his head and you could watch his eye coming out, but you couldn't quite see where it was coming from. But it was obviously his real head or from the side or something. But like I think they were just trying to make it super gross because you could see everything that was going on. But by doing that, they've almost ruined a little bit of that goriness because it's so obviously fake. So, it's like, do you balance it out by, okay, you don't get the gore factor by physically seeing his eye being taken out, but you do keep the audience within the realm of this being real if you just do something slightly different.
Yeah, yeah. I see. Now I see where you're coming from. I mean, yeah, obviously it does look a bit fake and whatnot. It's never really bothered me. I think it's weird because if I saw a realistic looking Arnold Schwarzenegger face in that scene, I think I'd feel weird about it because I'm so used to seeing
Yeah.
the fake head. And I'm also grateful that they never went back and remastered it, or and tried to
Yeah.
put Arnie's face in and whatnot. But I think once they started showing the scenes where he's ripped the skin off his forearm and he's messing around with the gears of his
Yeah.
fingers and
That's
whatnot.
good.
Like,
That was really good.
yeah, like that scene, and even the eye scene, that's where so as a kid, that's where it sold it for me that, oh, this is a
Yeah,
machine.
yeah.
And I think, I mean, maybe I'm just adding meaning here, but maybe when they do show the Play-Doh head and the eye moving around, I think it might just be a reminder to the audience that this is not a human, this is a machine, this
Mm,
is, yeah, don't be fooled. I don't know, I don't know. I'm just adding. I think I'm just
yeah.
covering for them for unsolicited covering for them, but yeah.
But it is cool. Like it's cool how yeah he slowly becomes just a skeleton, and at the end scene he is fully, completely lost any humanity. And I read that James Cameron had, I think he said it was a dream that he had, that it was like a solid chrome torso that was like chasing him or something like that and dragging itself on the floor, and that he thought
Yeah.
about this
So
film after having that dream.
yeah, so he was working on a movie called Piranha 2, which he was directing for, I don't know if it was Roger Corman or someone, I don't remember, but and I think during the post-production of the film he was fired or something, and I think he was already in, I think they were shooting in Rome, and I think he got sick out in Rome and was having a fever dream or something where
Right.
he I think he dreamt up the skeleton, the metal skeleton or whatever. But it turns out that the story or something for Terminator is actually very similar to an episode of I think it's the Twilight Zone or something.
Oh, what, does somebody come
And
back in time and have to save somebody from
some
being born? Or
something like that. I'm sure it's written down somewhere, but I don't know where it is. But yeah, so I think and there was some kind of like court case or lawsuit or something where
oh,
the original creator or whatever, told the studio, we're going to take you to court or whatever because you've stolen our story. But I think they settled out of court or something. Like I think Cameron maintains that he did not steal anything.
right.
But he was kind of strong-armed by the studio just to accept the settlement or whatever, just so there's no problems later on.
Yeah, just to deal with it.
Yeah, because you see like is it Harlan Ellison's name appear at the end credits. It's like one of the first names that appears that's like,
Oh,
inspired by the works of Harlan Ellison or whatever,
oh,
something like that.
right. Just to
Yeah, yeah.
appease them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I do feel like that last scene where the Terminator's like dragging itself towards Sarah, and you're like, oh my God, she must be so exhausted after everything she's gone through, and like
Yeah.
she's seen everybody die and like all this stuff. And that final crushing scene where she crushes the head, and he's come back alive so many times. Like he's been able to get out of the fire. He's been able to chase him down with like limbs missing and things. And then that really iconic bit where his eye goes from red and slowly just dies.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that the first time that anybody used that? Because obviously that's quite cliche now to see like a computer or something dying by the light going out in its eye, the literal LED light going out in its eye. But
Hmm.
I feel like that must have been the first time that was done, because it's very poignant when you think about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can't think of any other movie where they might have done it, or at least as well as it's done in this film. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's I really like how how one of the horror movie tropes you see it in loads of these horror movies like Halloween and Friday the 13th of that era, where you take the bad where the monster's killed, you think he's killed, but there's one final jump scare or something,
yeah,
And I love how in this film they don't just do like just one final jump scare. It's like it's almost like you've killed one boss and now the boss has changed form to
yeah,
his next form, and now you got to go for a second round and kill him again. So first Terminator is like the truck blows up when Carl Reese throws that pipe bomb into the truck, and the truck blows up, and they think they've killed Terminator, but yeah, then he rises from the ashes. You just see that
yeah,
kind of all the rubble falling, Terminator standing up and the rubble's falling off him, and it's
yeah,
like stop motion animation or whatever of Terminator standing up, and you just see like I think Sarah and Carl are hugging each other, and then they just turn around and look and just
yeah,
they're like can't believe what they're seeing, and I think this is probably like the wow moment for the audience when they
yeah,
finally see the exoskeleton or the endoskeleton of
yeah,
the Terminator, and then Terminator's like chasing them into the factory. I love that final scene with like the way they merged kind of like using a model Terminator skeleton and the stop motion animation.
yeah,
How they kept cutting back and forth, and then
yeah,
just the way it was all lit. And I love the close-ups of the Terminator model when it's a physical model being
yeah,
puppeted around, and you just see the bright red lights in the darkness, and it's just.
yeah.
And I loved how with the lights on the eyes, how they got smaller, how they dilated, and
Yeah, it's almost like gave it feeling, gave it
yeah, yeah.
emotion.
Yeah, and one thing I thought was genius, and I mean, obviously I was aware of this when I was a kid, but I never really understood the gravity of it when I was a kid. Is when Terminator, when Arnie is like going into the truck the first time after his accident, he's like kind of dragging his foot.
Yeah,
And then after you see the Terminator skeleton dragging its foot,
yeah.
when he's in skeleton form. And I think that's like a nice little link,
A
which
reminder. Yeah,
reminds the audience that this is the same character, like that this
yeah.
is the same person. So I thought that was genius, and I think James Cameron, oh gosh, he's a genius for doing little things like that. They kind of go under the radar for a lot of people, I think, where there's more than surface level. Like when you first go into the factory when they're escaping the Terminator, you notice in the background when Carl Reese starts turning all the equipment on so it can kind of give them cover. You see the crushers in the background start.
Yeah.
And then, so maybe on a subconscious level, it shows the audience that crusher exists. And then later on in the scene, I think Sarah Connor turns one of the crushers on by accident.
Yeah.
So
So
now
it's another reminder.
the
Yeah.
audience is reminded, but also this time it lets Sarah know that this exists.
Yeah.
And then finally at the end, when because it isn't just when the Terminator is in the crusher and Sarah's reaching for a button, she's not just fluking it. She knows this.
She has a plan.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of
And I
I
liked
just yeah.
I always really liked that scene because it allowed the humans to win because they're human. So the Terminator's job is just to kill Sarah. And so it just continues to go and go and go with no feeling, no idea, nothing. It just goes.
Yeah.
Whereas Sarah almost realizes right at the very end that she can beat this thing by being sneaky and by using all of the things that make us human to kill it, which is to trick it,
Yeah,
get it to
yeah,
follow her. And you don't really know what she's doing until the very end. And like you say, she
yeah.
knows what she's doing when she goes and hits that button. And a Terminator wouldn't have thought of that because it's just a machine that's like kill, 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 find quickest way to kill. And so it kind of gives you that, the humans prevailed because of their humanness.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Yeah. There's something that never really ever made sense to me when I was growing up. Maybe I just didn't think about it. But so there's a novelization of this movie, which includes a bit more detail than the movie does.
Oh,
And there's two things in the book that's I've not read the book, but I've only just found this out online. But
yeah.
there's apparently there's like a deleted scene from the movie that I've not seen. Or I don't know if it was even filmed. But so when Kyle Reese is making the pipe bombs, the reason they were doing that was because I think they wanted to go to the Cyberdyne factory to blow it up or something. That was
Yeah.
the original purpose of it. And but they don't say it in the movie. But there's apparently in one of the deleted scenes from the factory, I think the camera pulls away or something, and you see the Cyberdyne sign for the factory.
Oh, that's the factory.
Yeah, yeah. So they were actually heading towards that factory. The factory wasn't just like something they encountered randomly. They were intentionally
Right.
going towards the factory. And then in the factory, apparently a police officer or someone picks up the chip from the Terminator. And I think that's
Um,
how Cyberdyne gets the technology to build the Terminators.
oh,
So it all kind of so maybe there was this kind of destiny to the story where the Terminator is trying to kill Sarah Connor, but in order for that Terminator to even exist, Cyberdyne needed the technology,
yeah.
and so they led themselves, all three of them somehow led themselves to this factory where even though Sarah survived, the Terminator technology was then handed to
Yeah. So if
Cyberdyne.
Sarah had died earlier and they never made it to the factory, then she actually wouldn't have ever died because the Terminator wouldn't have existed.
Maybe, I don't
Because
know.
that's what's complicated about it is that if you think about it, everything in this film
Hmm.
had to have happened. Like there was no
Yeah.
other alternative because Sarah needed to get pregnant, so she had to have met Kyle. And so, but that means that if Kyle never came back, none of this would have happened because she would never have got pregnant. So it's
I,
like
I
everything has to happen.
So it's this weird kind of paradox where, yeah, because how would Kyle have come back in the first instance, how would she have got pregnant? Because Kyle wouldn't have come back.
Yeah.
And that's what I always thought. But I think there's a get out of jail free card here. Do you remember Sarah was meant to go on a date and the date stood her up?
Yeah.
I think if the whole Kyle Reese thing never happened, she would have gone on another date with the guy, and he would have been the father.
Yeah, but that still wouldn't have made sense because it wouldn't be the same kid. And also the reason why, what's his name? Connor, Sarah Connor's son.
John Connor. Yeah.
John Connor would never have become the leader because he only became the leader because Sarah Connor, his mother, raised him to be a warrior. Because that's what Kyle says. He's like, he became who he is because of his mother.
Yeah, yeah.
So like that wouldn't have happened if
I mean, it could have still happened.
Well, it's less likely though, because if she had sex with somebody else and none of this happened, why would she ever bring him up to be a fighter? And like he could have just been like a weedy tech, just like
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but maybe it was more, maybe I mean the only way I can kind of justify it or make it make sense to me is maybe it had no relevance who the father was ever. Maybe it was always about Sarah, and it was always going to be no matter who her kid was, they would have turned out to be she would have, after the war would have happened or whatever, she would have trained her kid to be
right. So regardless of what but I don't know. I mean, it's hard because, like you say, the timeline is a cycle. So all of the stuff only happens because it's already happened. So it's really confusing.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a few different schools of thought when it comes to time travel as well, because all right, so this is where we could end up getting really confused and blowing our own minds here. So there's one kind of, if time is like, a cycle or whatever, like where, she got pregnant. In order for her to get pregnant the first time around, Kyle Reese should have come back.
Yeah.
And it kind of creates this kind of loop where the events should have had to have happened in a certain order for history to have happened or the future to have happened.
Yeah.
Or is there let's say time has taken its course, and then you get to 2029 when Kyle Reese is sent back into the past. What if he's not sent back to the past that happened, but he's sent back into an alternative past?
Right.
Because so imagine if history and it was, once it's written, there's no going back and changing it, because and then he's sent back, he's not sent back to the history that's already happened. He's sent back to an alternative history, because you can't change what's happened. Otherwise, the moment he goes back to 1984, it could create a butterfly effect when none of the time travel stuff had ever happened. So I think the only way this works is if he's sent to an alternative timeline.
But how would that alternative timeline affect his actual present? Because the whole point of him going back in time is to save his present.
Or the moment he goes back to 1984, he creates an alternative timeline, or an alternative timeline is created. Sorry, that's how I should have explained it.
Yeah. So they're not two separate things. They become two separate things once it happens.
Yeah. And then where it also gets a bit, if you want to get really deep into it, or maybe, I don't know, where if the Terminator goes back first to 1984, and then Kyle Reese goes back, because the Terminator's already gone back, he's created an offshoot timeline.
Yeah.
There's no saying that Kyle Reese has gone back to the same timeline that the Terminator's gone to. So maybe there's some kind of multiverse kind of thing going on. But I think that's if you overthink it and you try to rationalize it. But I think I don't think that was the intention of the filmmakers. I think they went back in time and just modified.
And then modified it. Because I feel like the intention is to think that everything had to have happened the way it happened.
Yeah, I agree.
Because, the way that they breadcrumb it about his father, and then the photo that she sees, and then you see her at the end taking that photo. It's all like, it all is wrapped up into this one timeline. And then it makes you think, okay, so all of those things have to happen for the next thing to happen. And then, it just gets...
Yeah. But then where another layer of confusion gets added is Kyle Reese tells Sarah Connor, "Oh, John told me to send you a message. Something like the future is not set, or something. You can make your own destiny, or whatever. That the future is whatever you make it, or something weird like that." Which then implies that
it's not all set.
The future is changeable.
Yeah.
But then if it's changeable, I think I wish the film had those deleted scenes added where the guy picks up the chip and we realize they're going to the Cyberdyne factory, because then it would almost make the events inevitable.
Yeah, because that's what's cool. One of the coolest parts about this film is thinking about time travel and thinking about like exactly the conversation we've just had that everybody will be having when they watch the film, because they're like, oh, so does that mean this only happens because of this, or what would happen if they did this? And the more breadcrumbs you can feed into a film like that, the cooler it becomes. becomes because you start thinking about it. It's quite like which I guess is time travel kind of, but space films where they talk about time being different in different places, like on different planets, like a
Yeah.
year is a second or whatever. Then you start thinking like, oh, so if they've been there that long, how long has it been in here and all this stuff, and it just adds a lot of depth to a film because you have to really think about what it means when they say this.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think time, space, and gravity are all interlinked, I think because when you're sending someone back into time, you're not just sending them back to 1984. You're sending them to a certain space as well, a certain
Yeah,
location. And now we're like on this planet that's moving around the sun at 1 billion miles an hour or whatever.
yeah,
And that sun is our solar system is orbiting something else.
yeah.
And that is orbiting some black hole in the middle of our galaxy. So we need to pinpoint which part of the cosmos we're going back to.
And
Where
where
was
you'd
the Earth?
land.
Where
Yeah.
was the Earth and where was Los Angeles in 1984 in our universe? So that's the
Yes.
time that's the time and space link. So that's where it really screws with your head. And
Yeah, because you could, if you went back in time, you could just end up floating in the universe because you've missed your spot.
you've got the wrong time. Yeah, you would literally a Terminator would land in space and then they would like like implode or something or
Yeah, I
explode or
guess
freeze or whatever.
it's too much to think about.
Yeah.
Anyway, I one other fact that I had, which was about her again, something you probably know, but you know, you talk about Sarah Connor was supposed to go on that date with the guy, but he cancelled.
Yeah,
The voice on the phone is James Cameron,
that's right.
and
Yeah, yeah.
that the actress who played Sarah Connor married James Cameron
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
got divorced later in life. But it's funny that he was the one that cancelled on her. Did they marry after this film or
Yeah,
before?
yeah, yeah, yeah. They got, I think they married in like, oh gosh, it was the 90s. I
Okay.
think that they were married and divorced like by the time I think T2 came out and before Titanic had arrived. But I
Okay.
think it was a very short marriage from what I can
Yeah.
understand.
But it's kind of like, you know, he was flirting with her in the film by like being the boyfriend.
Absolutely. And maybe he's John Connor's initial father.
Yeah, that
But
could have been a whole different
for
film.
being the voice, yeah. And the producer on the movie, Gail Ann Hurd, was actually James Cameron's wife at the time of this movie.
Oh,
So he was,
wow.
so yeah,
God, he's
she produced this for him, Aliens for him, and The Abyss for him. So she was like his 1980s producer.
and he
And
left her for Linda Hamilton.
yeah, then I think he met his next wife on Titanic.
How many wives
So
has he had?
oh, loads. So, you know the old lady in Titanic, who's
Yeah.
telling the story? You know her
It's been
daughter?
84 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think her daughter is the lady who he's married to right now.
Oh, wow. God, so he really does he doesn't need Tinder or anything. He just makes films and then people just kind of marry him.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think this is his main wife. I think so he's been with this one
Fifth
for like over
wife.
20 years, yeah.
It's his fifth wife.
Mm.
Wow.
Oh gosh, he was married to Catherine Bigelow as well. I totally forgot. She's another movie director. Like she's done some good movies.
Ah.
Like Zero Dark 30 and oh gosh, what's the one with Keanu Reeves? Point Break with Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves.
Oh yeah.
She's like an
Wow.
accomplished award-winning director in her own right, yeah.
And Gail Ann Hurd. He
Yeah.
had a lot of very short relationships between the 80s and 90s.
He is notorious for being like a real taskmaster, like a perfectionist. You know, I think on the set, I don't know if it's a set of this movie or some other movie. I think the crew, as a joke, made T-shirts saying, "I'm not scared of anybody. I work for James Cameron" or something like that. Like,
So he's one of the directors that give directors a bad name, you
but
know.
look at his career. Look at his
Yeah.
career. Aliens, Terminator,
You have to be
Titanic,
a bit
Avatar. Like,
crazy to be able to be this successful. Like
I
super
think like
successful people have these weird things, and he's
yeah,
sort of the taskmaster.
because like I think the out of the top grossing movies of all time, his name's on that list like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, with both the avatars
yeah,
at
yeah,
least and Titanic.
yeah, yeah. I thought it was kind of funny to be honest. But do you know when the Terminators when Terminator's going through the phone book looking for the people's names? Do you
Yeah.
remember a time when those books existed and you could
Not
find anyone's
really.
name?
No.
Yeah, so that even in this country they existed. Like I
Yeah.
remember seeing my dad's name with the house address and the telephone number next to it. Like you had to opt out to be out
to
of those
not be in
books.
it. I do remember asking my mum why there were loads of companies that had A names. And she was like, so they're first in the phone book. So like
Yeah.
Albatross taxis, it's always Albatross
Yeah.
or something
Yeah.
like that, so that they'll be at the front of the telephone
It's
book. I was like,
true.
that's so
It's
clever.
true. Yeah, I remember getting my drive, like my, so the person who ended up being my final driving instructor, like from the phone
Yeah.
book, like the yellow pages or whatever it was. It's a different time. But imagine if so oh, here's another bit that was missing from the movie, but it's in the novelization. So Skynet knew Sarah Connor existed, but they didn't know what she looked like, but they knew so when the war had happened, a lot of documentation had been destroyed,
Yeah.
but they knew Sarah Connor was from California, or Los Angeles, and what they knew about her was she'd had some kind of ice skating accident or whatever, so she had pins in her legs. So
Yeah.
what the Terminator would do is go back in time, kill Sarah Connor, and then check her leg to see if the
Yeah.
pin's there. But that's
I,
something that was omitted from the
it
movie.
wasn't in the film, and I think I read that somewhere because it is cool, but I suppose like I guess it doesn't change the story in any way, so you could not do it. But
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is cool.
Yeah, and I wonder how something like that would play out, the search for Sarah Connor, how it would play out today, where if a Terminator came back today to 2024,
Just Instagram or
gosh,
Facebook.
2024, this is 40 years after the
Yeah.
movie, exactly 40 years almost. And but imagine all the different variables that exist now that didn't really exist back then. So other than, was Sarah Connor her original name?
Yeah.
Did she change it to Sarah Connor?
Yeah.
So who are you looking for? And I mean, if was Sarah her birth sex?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
this something she changed?
Yeah.
Like how would you make that work today? Like
Your Terminators would have to be well versed in social media to come back and like look
and
people up and do a bit of stalking.
it's social media, and they'd have to be good at I don't know, what's the science of humanity and
I don't know.
yeah, sociology
It's
or
like
whatever. I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah, they'd have to be good at all that kind of stuff. I don't know.
I think it's easier just to look through a phone book and just he is right. The most efficient way is just to kill them all off. and just but I
Work your way
also
through, yeah.
I love that like they don't have the foresight to be like, okay, the Sarah Connor that he kills is like quite old, one of them. And it's like, well, clearly that's not Sarah Connor, but he doesn't care. So he's just like, Sarah Connor.
No,
Yes.
no. Yes, son. Yeah. And the other one's like a Spanish girl he kills.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, could you not have whittled it down a little bit? Oh no. No,
Or
clearly
maybe he
not.
doesn't see color or age or anything, because when you see the Terminator vision, everything's just really either red or black.
Yeah, that's true. It's all just code, so he's
Yeah.
not really thinking about it.
I found there was a few things I found weird in the film where so as soon as the two time travelers have kind of landed, we see like a scene the next day where Arnie is walking through this kind of suburban town or street, and he then breaks into a car to steal the car during the day.
Yes.
And I'm just thinking, like, what the hell was he doing the whole night? Like, why didn't he steal the
True.
car? Why didn't he steal the car at night when there's like no one around?
And also, yeah, he's not going to be sleeping. So what's he doing? I thought his mission is just to get to Sarah Connor. Why was he taking a break?
Yeah, yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. There's a lot of crushing moments here. So in the beginning, you see the future Terminator tank crush a bunch of skulls in
Yes.
the future war, and then you see like a car crush like a toy truck, and
Yeah.
I think you see Terminator step on a few things. I think he steps on someone's glasses, or he steps on something and
Yeah.
crushes it, and then at the end of the movie, Terminator himself gets crushed.
Gets crushed.
And I never really put that link
Ah,
together before
that's
until
cool.
like
I
right
didn't notice
now.
that.
No, neither did I until like literally right this second, to be honest.
Yeah, more foreshadowing, and maybe it ties into the fact that it's all going to happen. It's all part of one timeline.
Maybe Terminator just has a crush on Sarah Connor. Oh,
You're
and
crushing it.
oh. And I think this is there's one bit where Terminator breaks character, which I didn't fully understand what was going on. But you know when he's after he's done his forearm and his eye, and he's in that hotel room, his kind of base of operations or whatever,
Yeah.
and he leaves the room, goes into the corridor, and holds his rifle or whatever like at his shoulder, and he's just walking down this corridor, and the people in the corridor get scared of him.
Yeah.
Now, Terminator is meant to be an infiltration unit. Like, why is he walking around in public
Yeah.
with a gun on his shoulder? That
Yeah.
bit, even though it's a cool image, I think that's when he's heading off to the police station to destroy the police station.
Yeah, you're right. And it's like, why spend all that time and money, I suppose, making them look so human for them to do things that will obviously make them stand out?
yeah, but if the Terminator is programmed to do a certain mission, it will stick. It can only stick to that program. It can't
Yeah.
like it can't re. There's only so much it can deviate from that. So I think one
But
of its
if,
directives would have been to infiltrate because it's an
yeah,
infiltration unit. Yeah,
but then it didn't.
it didn't. Yeah. Hmm.
But maybe it gets overridden because, like, he obviously then drives the car into the police station. That's not very, sneak attack of him. So maybe there's like it's overridden by the fact that he needs to kill her, that it
That's
doesn't really
true.
matter how you do it, you just get it done.
Yeah, I suppose he could have just shot the receptionist and
Yeah.
then just walked around
He
in
was
front
just
of.
being dramatic. He just wanted to make a dramatic entrance.
You
Like,
you
yes.
you need some cool moments for the trailer. That's what you
Yeah,
need. That's what this
exactly.
is what it is. Yeah,
And is that I'll be back? Yeah, it is. That's
it
when he
is.
says I'll be
Yeah.
back. So, it
Right.
does become iconic.
There's so many good lines in this film.
And the fact that Arnie doesn't have any lines basically is very
He's got like
iconic.
he says like 10 words in the entire movie or
Yeah.
something.
I wonder if he needed to learn the script or he just kind of I mean, I'll be back wasn't, as everybody knows, wasn't the original thing he's supposed to say. So he clearly can't even remember his 10 lines.
Well, he did a good job, and
He
that
did a very
became
good
kind of
job.
his catchphrase. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think oh gosh, I think we probably read the same thing where I think Arnie wanted to change the line or something,
Mm.
and James Cameron said, "I don't tell you how to act, you don't tell me how to write my script," or something weird like that.
James Cameron.
But he was
God.
right. He
He
was
was
right.
right. Sometimes you're not all correct, James Cameron, with your 10 wives and you're being mean to everyone.
I'm on his side. I'm rooting for him. Yeah, I thought, I mean, "Come with me if you want to live" was another line from this movie, which has just been reused in every Terminator movie.
Yeah.
I think "Get
Yeah.
Out" as well. "Get Out"
I mean,
has been reused in
get
every
out.
movie.
I feel like "Come with me if you want to live" is a very good way of getting someone to come with you. It's everybody like, "I'll explain later, just come with me." It's like, look, do you want to survive? Come with me.
Yeah, I think as the sequels progressed, I think they I might be mistaken, but I think they kind of morphed the lines a little bit, like "Come with me if you don't want to die" or something like.
Yeah. But they're like, we're still saying the same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
I mean, it is interesting how the phenomenon of like what makes a film a cult classic happens. Because I'm sure that there are films within the same ilk as Terminator, but there's something so addictive about Terminator that elevates it, even though it did have a small budget and even though it did have like a small cast. And I think it's just like a mix of everything we just said makes it like it is unique. And I don't think there's anybody that I have ever met who hasn't seen it. And I'm very surprised if there is somebody that hasn't seen it.
Yeah, it's I think it comes down to the fact that it's like you could turn the sound off in this movie and you could watch it and still understand what's going on. It's a
Yeah,
very kind of
yeah.
high concept movie where you could explain the concept to someone in, whilst you're riding the elevator to, the next floor. Like it's very.
Yeah, you're right. And it's one of those films that like has been repeated so much because I even remember there was a recent time traveler Netflix series. I think it was called like 196. It was a date like 1967, 1960
No,
something.
not seen it,
And
no.
it was about like time travelers going to different time periods to solve a murder. It was really good. And they have the same time travel like experience. So they all just pop up and they're really hurt and they're naked and they're like crawled up on the floor and they're like, oh.
Oh, I haven't
And
seen
it's
this.
exactly the same type of time travel and I think it is an homage to Terminator because it's very like the bit where Kyle lands
Hmm.
basically happens with all the other ones in that. So it's like, these things do get replicated because they are so
Yeah.
iconic and they all come from one place.
Yeah, I think Terminator, probably the original, probably set the generally accepted standards of a time travel in a movie. I guess
Yeah.
maybe I don't know. It's difficult to believe that Back to the Future came out the year after this movie. And
Really?
yeah, and to me, in my head, the gulf between these two movies, like Back to the Future, is such a well-produced, beautiful looking film. And in my head, I feel like no, Back to the Future came out like 6 years after Terminator, but it's
Yeah.
only really the year before.
But
It's
that's the power of the budget, isn't it? Is like Terminator could have looked very different, I think, if they had a massive budget. I don't think it could would have looked as good, but it would have probably looked a lot more polished than
they
it
did such a
did.
good. You can see every dollar of this movie on the screen.
Yeah.
Here's something that might blow your mind. Have you seen Terminator 2?
Yeah.
So Terminator 2 also starts off with a future war scene.
Mm.
And and it's only like 5 minutes or something, maybe even less than that, maybe even like 2 minutes or something. The budget of that opening 2 minutes in Terminator 2 was more than the entire budget of Terminator
What?
1. It's like
That's crazy.
that's how much they wanted that sequel.
Wow. That's insane.
Yeah, yeah. And I think James Cameron wanted to start shooting Terminator sooner, but he couldn't because Arnie was busy shooting movies.
Yeah,
And
I
in
think he was still in contract for the Conan one,
yeah,
whatever
the
they were called.
Destroyer.
Yeah.
Conan the Destroyer. Yeah, and I think in that time whilst he was waiting, he wrote Rambo 2, the first blood plot part 2,
Yeah.
and Aliens whilst he was waiting. So
That's
that's like,
crazy. I mean, that man does have an incredible brain. I'll give him that. And yeah, it's a testament to his script writing abilities to be able to make films that, although they're in a similar genre in a lot of ways, they are so different. And you can just appreciate them for what they are. And I also like that his first films were much more on the horror side. Like he did like a good, creepy aspect of things, which he does carry through in a lot of his films, but he then goes into a lot of blockbusters afterwards. So it's nice to see that his roots are like in our genre.
oh gosh, yeah, horror movies all the way, man. Oh, yeah, I think even though Terminator, the first Terminator is yeah, it's a science fiction movie. Also, yeah, I think we can agree it's a horror slasher movie dressed up
Yeah.
as a science fiction movie, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, Mike watched this, so it's not a horror film. If
Oh,
Mike
if it,
can, yeah, if he can sit through it, I'm not sure I can count it as a horror film because it's clearly not scary enough.
yeah, for anyone listening that doesn't understand the reference, Mike is Celia's other half, and Mike can't watch horror movies. So if he was comfortable
Cannot.
with the
Yeah,
Terminator, it
yeah, and
definitely wasn't a horror
actually,
movie.
he fell asleep, which isn't a testament to this being a bad film. It just means he falls asleep at everything. But it also meant that he was obviously not scared because he could snore for the last half an hour. He would randomly wake up when like there was an explosion or something and go, whoa, whoa. But I was like, well, if you're not going to stay awake, I'm not going to talk to you about it.